Let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's chat our analytical essay, which is IA1 or Internal Assessment 1. So this is a type of assessment that you're probably quite familiar with, but it does have a bit of a twist. It is a little bit more complex in the sense that you're going to be dealing with criticism. So this is your first analytical task of 2 for the year, and it's being used as a platform to critique others' interpretations and responses to the text. So you're dealing with a literary critic, you're talking about how they respond to the text and how that might differ from your own response. The criteria further specifies that this essay is to be focused on key themes related to culture or identity. That's really important. Otherwise, it's quite your basic analytical task. It's 800 to 1,000 words, but so excitingly, you do get a boon, you get a little gift, which is that you're allowed to have 200 words worth of quotations in the exam room. Now, this is not a gift you get in your external exam, so definitely make the most of it. Be thinking really intentionally about what quotations you want to bring in and how you're going to be able to use that quotations broadly and to the best of your ability. All right, we're going to have a little look at some of the key criteria for this first analytical task. Now, the word you're going to be seeing the most in this criteria is the word discerning. And discerning essentially means showing or demonstrating good judgment. So discerning analysis or discerning use of something, discerning selection, just means that you have really thought intentionally about how you are writing this piece. Intentional writing is the thing that sets apart junior high school writing from senior high school writing. The marker wants to understand and see that you have thought very specifically about all of the choices you make as an author. So our first set of criteria, discerning analysis of perspectives and representations of concepts, identities, times and places in a literary text, and of others' interpretations of and or responses to this text. So you need to be thinking really carefully about the cultural context which surrounds the text, understanding the way that it has manipulated the concepts, identities, times, and places, but you also need to be thinking about the way that the critic has viewed these same things, how that differs, and how that relates to the author's intentions for the text. Then you have discerning analysis of the ways cultural assumptions, attitudes, values, and beliefs underpin a literary text and invite audiences to take up positions. So audience positioning, it's something that people forget about a bit too much, but you need to be thinking clearly about who the audience is and how they see the world, what society they live within. The cultural assumptions, attitudes, values, and beliefs are a set of buzzwords that you will see countless times, not only in literature syllabi, but in English as well. So you need to be thinking about how those influence the world that the audience lives in, the world that we live in. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about those later on. And then finally, discerning analysis of the effects of aesthetic features and stylistic devices in a literary text in prompting critical and emotional responses. So again, this is not just alluding to your analysis, being able to pull apart aesthetic features and stylistic devices and thinking critically about the way that the author has used them or why the author has used them, but it's also alluding as well to the importance of audience positioning. How does your analysis affect audience positioning? And it's demonstrating here that your essay is going to need really good synthesis, really good flow of logic. You have to connect your analysis to your audience positioning and see how your audience positioning is influenced by your analysis. All right. Discerning use of patterns and conventions of an analytical essay and the role of essay writer to analyze the literary text. As I mentioned earlier, your marker is really interested in the intentional choices that you're making as an author, so you need to be aware of your voice, tone, and style as an essay writer. You need to be writing in an academic voice, you need to be discerning in the way that you write, and you need to have a really clear argument. That is the most important. You're not just writing for the fun of it, you're not just analyzing the quotes that are the most famous or the ones that you talked about the most in class. Everything needs to be linking back to your thesis, and your thesis needs to remain clear and consistent throughout your whole piece. That is the main role of the essay writer. It's their most important role, and it's one that you can't deviate on. Discerning selection and synthesis of subject matter to support perspectives. Again, that's linked to your thesis. All of the evidence that you choose has to be chosen in order to argue your thesis, in order to further your thesis. Discerning organization and sequencing of subject matter, including the discerning use of cohesive devices to emphasize ideas and connect parts of the analytical text. So we're all about synthesis here, we're all about the logical flow of information. So you're not only having the basic structure, introduction, body, conclusion, but you are clearly stepping through the analysis in a way that makes sense. It's really important that you don't get bogged down in long sentences or flowery vocabulary or things like that. Clarity is always more important than complexity when it comes to this task, because more than anything, the marker needs to understand what your argument is. It doesn't matter if you know lots of long words, lots of impressive words. If the marker gets confused, if they lose sight of what your argument is, then you're not going to get marked well. So clarity is so important as a priority. All right, and finally, discerning language choices for particular purposes. So again, intentionality about the way that you are writing, discerning combination of a range of grammatically accurate and appropriate language structures, including clauses and sentences to achieve particular purposes. So you're not just doing exclusively long sentences, you're not just doing exclusively short sentences, you're using them in combination and things like that. Really intentional about being correct in terms of your grammar and spelling, using excess time at the end of the exam to go back and edit really carefully for those sorts of things. And discerning use of written features, including conventional spelling and punctuation, to achieve particular purposes. And that's pretty straightforward. I don't need to spoon feed you that one. All right, so let's talk about this criticism. Let's talk about this thing that alters this from your standard everyday analytical piece. So we're going to focus more on what it means to be including literary criticism in this section of today. So first of all, you have to be able to read analytical criticism, literary criticism rather. It's a bit complicated and difficult, and by its nature, literary criticism is most often tertiary level kind of writing, so it's probably a writing style that you guys are a little bit unfamiliar with. The good news is you generally don't have to read every single word of the piece. Not all of it is going to be relevant to you. So when you're approached with perhaps a stack of writing that can be about that thick, start simply with your introduction and conclusion. Get a good idea of what the author's argument is. Get an idea of what they are trying to prove as correct or what they're trying to persuade the reader to understand. And then you can go ahead and read through the topic sentence of each paragraph. Get an idea of what points they're going to make in each of their paragraphs, and then you can identify which ones are the most relevant to you and which ones you want to read in more detail. It's really important to annotate, because that means when you're going back through the work later on, you can find the most important information easily, and you don't have to kind of be trawling through all of this heavy writing multiple times to find the things that you need. In its most simple, just highlight the information that is most important, the quotes that you feel like are going to be useful for writing an essay. Note down the things that you don't understand, and then you can take them to class or take them to your peers or teacher to explain more. And definitely be intentional about marking out where there's connections of ideas, where ideas have been connected together, where characters or themes or relationships have been linked together. You can note down the ideas within the criticism that you agree with and those that you don't, because remember, both can be used in your essay. Ideas that you agree with can bolster your argument, but also those that you don't agree with, because you can go ahead and sort of shoot them down like you might in a persuasive piece. And then finally, the criticism that you're going to be utilizing in your work will be specified prior to the exam rather. Since you do have to include specific quotes from this criticism in your essay. So you're able to take quotes from that on your quote sheet into the exam room with you. It's likely that the criticism will be mentioned in the essay question, which means that you're going to have to mention the criticism in your thesis. Because remember, a good thesis uses explicit language from the question within the thesis itself to prove to the marker that you're answering the question directly. All right, so one of the most difficult elements of this task, the element of this task that I think makes it worthy of being a senior task, is having to hold the critic and the author in equal measure. So it's vital to remember that those are separate roles. They are not one and the same. They're not mutually exclusive. So the author is still the power behind the text. You and the critic are in tension over your understanding and analysis of the author's choices. So it's up to you to argue whether you agree, partially agree, or disagree with the critic.